What was your family's cruelest rule? Every night, my dad made us vote on which family member deserved to sleep in a real bed and who had to sleep in the metal shed outside. And if you refused to rank your own mother and siblings from best to worst, you automatically got the shed. Dad sat at the head of the table with his stupid clipboard, reading out our names like some sick game show host. "Time for rankings," he'd say, smiling while the rest of us stared at our plates. He was always exempt because he managed the system, which meant he slept in the master bedroom every night while we tore each other apart for the remaining spots. The best bed went to whoever got ranked highest, which meant an actual mattress, soft pillows, warm blankets, and your own room with a door that locked. Second place got the couch in the living room, while third got a sleeping bag on the basement floor. Fourth place got the garage with just a yoga mat, and dead last slept in the shed. By the time I was 12, I'd spent dozens of nights in that shed. We all had, except for Dad. One night when I was 13, all my siblings ranked me last because they were pissed I'd lost my shoe and made them late for school that morning. The metal floor burned cold through the gasoline-soaked blanket while rain hammered the roof like gunshots. Spiders dropped from the ceiling onto my face and mice ran over my legs while I shivered until my bones hurt. The rankings destroyed us in exactly the ways Dad wanted. My brother Yutef sabotaged everyone else constantly to look better by comparison. He'd hide homework, break things and blame others, start fights right before dinner to make someone look bad. Once he put sugar in Mom's gas tank so she'd miss work and look irresponsible to Dad. She spent 3 nights in the shed while her car got fixed, and Yutef slept soundly on the couch. Playing nice never worked because someone always needed a scapegoat to avoid last place. Good grades and finished chores meant nothing when the alternative was freezing on metal flooring. Every dinner became a silent calculation of who you could sacrifice tonight, which family member you loved least in that moment, whose suffering would hurt you least to cause. My sister Yasmin had perfected crying on command and would sob during dinner about her previous nights in the shed, instantly earning sympathy votes. Yusef made deals and promises, trading future high rankings for votes now. Mom tried staying neutral, but that just meant everyone ranked her low for not having allies, so she spent more nights in the shed than anyone. After years of this, we barely spoke except to negotiate votes. Family dinner was just Dad reading rankings while we glared at each other across the table, calculating betrayals and planning revenge. I kept a notebook tracking voting patterns, looking for alliances to exploit or weaknesses to target. Trust between us had died long ago, and love followed shortly after. Then Yasmin got sick during a week of storms, running a fever so high she couldn't sit up at dinner. Dad's rule was absolute because no vote meant automatic shed placement. She lay there shaking and delirious, too weak to even point at names on his list. "Rules are rules," Dad said, marking her down for the shed before carrying her out there himself, while rain poured through the rust holes. By morning, she had pneumonia and was coughing up blood on the metal floor. Still too sick to vote the next night meant another automatic shed placement. I tried sneaking her extra blankets, but Dad caught me and called it tampering with rankings, which earned me 5 nights in the shed as punishment. I spent those nights listening to my baby sister dying 10 feet away, while Dad made notes about maintaining system integrity. Mom finally defied Dad and took Yasmin to the hospital, but by then something in Yutef had permanently broken. He'd do anything to avoid the shed, including recording conversations for blackmail material and putting laxatives in food before ranking day. He spread lies about Mom that made Dad scream at her for hours, guaranteeing she'd get sympathy votes from us. The doctors asked about Yasmin's frostbitten toes and the rust marks on her skin, but Mom lied and said she'd been camping. They didn't believe her but couldn't prove anything without Yasmin talking, and she hadn't said a word since getting sick. Dad punished Mom with 2 weeks straight in the shed, and she came back thinner and quieter. One night, Dad announced a new development in his system. The shed wasn't the bottom anymore because he dug a pit behind it with just dirt walls and a tarp on top. "For whoever ranks last starting now," he explained, visibly excited about his innovation, "the shed will be for second to last. Progress." Yusef immediately volunteered to dig it deeper in exchange for immunity from last place for a week, and I knew we were completely lost. My brother was literally digging a grave for his family members to sleep in just to avoid it himself. Mom had given up entirely, automatically ranking herself last every night with a defeated smile. Yasmin remained too weak to vote properly, which guaranteed more shed nights. The pit was almost finished, and tonight someone would sleep in dirt. I stare at the hole behind the shed, dirt walls packed tight and the blue tarp stretched across the top like some kind of twisted camping setup. My stomach twists into knots as Dad walks out the back door with his clipboard, that sick smile spreading across his face when he sees us all looking. He taps the clipboard against his palm and announces that tonight marks a special occasion because someone gets to be first in the pit. Yasmin sits slumped at the kitchen table inside, barely able to hold her head up, and I know if she can't vote again, she'll end up down there in the cold dirt. I make myself a promise right then that I'll take her place no matter what it costs me, even if Dad adds extra punishment nights or makes up new rules to hurt me worse. The sun is setting and the temperature is already dropping, frost starting to form on the grass around the pit's edges. Dad calls us inside for dinner and we file in silently, taking our usual spots around the table while he sits at the head with his clipboard ready. He's smiling that awful smile again, the one that says he's enjoying every second of this, and we all stare down at our plates to avoid making eye contact with him or each other. Mom speaks first in this flat, empty voice that sounds like all the life got sucked out of her, ranking herself last the way she always does now with that defeated little smile. Yusef leans over and whispers that he'll rank me second to last if I support him for the couch, his eyes cold and calculating like he's working out some business deal instead of deciding where his family members sleep tonight. I want to punch him in the face, but I need allies if I'm going to keep Yasmin safe. So I nod slightly and watch Dad making notes on his clipboard. Yusef starts his usual performance, reminding everyone in this cheerful voice how he helped with dishes and took out the trash today, conveniently leaving out the part where he broke the bathroom faucet this morning and told Dad I did it. Yasmin tries her crying routine, but she's too weak to make it work, tears just sliding down her pale cheeks without the dramatic sobs that usually get her sympathy votes. She's shaking from fever or cold or both, and I can see her trying so hard to participate but failing. The whole ritual makes me physically sick, but I force myself to go through the motions anyway, ranking people in my head, and calculating who I can sacrifice tonight, because refusing to vote means automatic pit placement, and I can't help Yasmin if I'm the one down there. Dad reads through each name slowly, savoring the moment, while we call out our rankings one by one. When Dad finishes counting the votes, he looks almost disappointed for a second, then announces that Mom gets the pit and Yasmin gets the shed. Something about his tone makes it clear he was hoping Yasmin would end up in the pit for the big debut, but the numbers worked out different. I feel this tiny moment of relief until I look at Mom's face and watch it go completely blank, all expression draining away like someone pulled a plug. She doesn't protest or argue or even look upset, just stands up slowly and walks toward the back door like a ghost floating across the room. I want to scream that this isn't normal, that families don't do this to each other, that we should all refuse together and let Dad sleep in his own stupid pit, but the words get stuck in my throat and won't come out. Yusef is already heading for the living room to claim the couch, and Yasmin shuffles toward the back door, coughing wetly into her hand. That night, I lie on my sleeping bag in the basement and can't stop thinking about the storm week when Yasmin got pneumonia. I can still hear her coughing up blood on the metal shed floor, this awful wet sound that went on for hours while I shivered through my own punishment nights for trying to sneak her blankets. Dad had called it tampering with rankings and added 5 extra nights to my sentence, standing there with his clipboard taking notes about maintaining system integrity while his daughter was literally dying 10 feet away from him. The memory makes my hands shake with rage and I have to press them flat against the concrete floor to make them stop. Mom is in the pit right now, lying in cold dirt with just a tarp between her and the night sky, and I'm down here safe and warm by comparison. The guilt sits heavy in my chest, but I remind myself that being in the basement means I can still help, still plan, still figure out how to stop this. I can't sleep knowing Mom is out there, so I sneak over to the tiny basement window and look out at the backyard. It's almost midnight and getting colder, frost forming thick on the grass around the edges of the pit. The tarp sags slightly in the middle where Mom must be lying underneath, and I can see her shape moving occasionally, trying to find a position that doesn't hurt as much. Dad's bedroom light is still on upstairs, and I can see his shadow moving around behind the curtains, probably reviewing his precious clipboard and making notes about tonight's rankings, planning new ways to torture us tomorrow. He's probably excited about how well the pit is working, already thinking about improvements he could make or new rules he could add to the system. I pull out my phone that I've been hiding in my sleeping bag, wrapped in an old sock so Dad won't find it if he searches down here. I look at the photos I took weeks ago of Yasmin's frostbitten toes, the skin black and dead looking at the tips and the rust marks on her back from the shed floor that look like someone beat her. My hands shake as I scroll through the images and realize I have to do something bigger than just taking pictures, something that might actually stop this before someone dies in that pit. Even if it means Dad punishes me worse than ever, even if he adds weeks to my shed time or invents some new horrible consequence, I can't let Yasmin end up down there in the dirt. The photos are evidence, but they're not enough. Not when Dad can smile and charm his way through any conversation, making everyone believe we're just dramatic kids exaggerating normal discipline. The next morning, I wait until I hear the shower running upstairs, then creep into the kitchen where Mom is standing at the sink. I whisper about maybe calling someone for help, a teacher or a neighbor or even the police, keeping my voice low so Dad won't hear through the bathroom door. Mom grabs my arm hard enough to leave marks, her fingers digging into my skin, and warns me in this urgent whisper that Dad always finds out about everything we do. She says he has ways of knowing, that he checks our phones and reads our notebooks, and listens to our conversations, and anyone who tries to get outside help just ends up punished worse. Her eyes look hollow and scared, like all the fight got beaten out of her years ago, and I realize she's been broken so completely that she can't even imagine escape anymore. She actually believes we're stuck in this system forever, that there's no way out except to survive it one night at a time. At breakfast, Yusef is practically bouncing in his chair, bragging to Dad about how he made the pit 6 inches deeper yesterday afternoon. He holds up his hands to show off the blisters on his palms like they're trophies he won, going on about how the extra depth will provide better insulation or some garbage like that. Dad actually smiles at him, this genuine proud father smile I haven't seen in years, and promises Yusef immunity from last place for the next week as a reward for his hard work. I feel physically sick watching my brother volunteer to dig what's basically a grave for his own family members, doing it eagerly just to save himself from ending up down there. Utef meets my eyes across the table, and there's no guilt or shame in his expression. Just this cold satisfaction that he secured his safety for another week. He's turned into exactly what Dad wanted him to be. I spend the rest of the morning trying to understand why Dad does this, what he actually gets from watching us destroy each other every single night. It's not just about control, though that's part of it. He genuinely enjoys the rankings. I can see it in his face when he reads the results. The way his eyes light up when we have to calculate who we love least in that moment. He likes the fear in our eyes when we realize we might be going to the pit. The desperate negotiations we make with each other. The way trust between us died years ago and got replaced with survival calculations. He calls it system integrity and talks about fairness and rules, but really it's just cruelty disguised as some kind of reasonable family structure. And he's the only one who never suffers, never spends a single night cold or scared or hurt, just sleeps in his comfortable bed every night while we tear each other apart for the remaining spots. At the school the next day, I can barely keep my eyes open during first period, my head nodding forward every few minutes until I jerk awake again. The teacher's voice sounds like it's coming from underwater, and the words on the board blur together into meaningless shapes. I dig my fingernails into my palm hard enough to leave marks, because falling asleep means I won't be able to think clearly tonight, and if I can't participate in rankings, I get the pit automatically. During math class, I start doing calculations that have nothing to do with the lesson, figuring out how to protect Yasmin tonight. If I can convince Utef to rank Mom second to last and I volunteer for last place myself, at least Yasmin gets the couch. It's not much protection, but it's something, and keeping her safe is the only thing that still matters in this destroyed family. The bell rings for lunch, and instead of going to the cafeteria, I head straight for the bathroom on the second floor that nobody uses. I lock myself in the far stall and pull out my phone with shaking hands, rolling up my sleeves to photograph the bruises on my arms from 3 nights ago when Dad grabbed me during a ranking argument. The marks have faded to yellow and green, but they're still visible, proof that this isn't normal discipline. I take 5 photos from different angles, making sure the bruises show up clearly in the bathroom's harsh lighting. Then I open my voice recorder app and start explaining the system in a low whisper, keeping my voice factual and calm even though my hands won't stop trembling. I describe the shed, the pit, the nightly votes, how Dad exempts himself while forcing us to rank each other. My mouth goes dry halfway through and I have to stop and swallow before continuing, terrified that someone will walk in and hear me, that Dad will somehow find out what I'm doing. The whole recording is maybe 90 seconds long, but it feels like hours, and when I'm done, my heart is pounding so hard I feel sick. I delete the recording from the recent files list and stuff my phone back in my pocket, then sit on the toilet lid trying to calm down enough to go to class. The rest of the school day passes in a blur of exhaustion and planning. I keep thinking about Miss Ann McCann, how she's always been kind when I've fallen asleep in her class, the way she looks at me sometimes like she knows something is wrong. If I can just get her to really listen, maybe she'll help us. I practice the words in my head during every class, trying to figure out how to explain the shed and pit without sounding crazy or dramatic. It has to sound believable, factual, like I'm reporting something that happened rather than making up stories for attention. By the time the final bell rings, I've rehearsed it 20 times, and the words almost sound normal instead of completely insane. After school, I go to the library instead of heading straight home, finding a computer in the back corner where nobody can see my screen. I create a new email account with a random username that has nothing to do with my real name, then upload all the photos and audio files to a hidden folder in the cloud. It takes forever because the library Wi-Fi is slow, and I keep checking over my shoulder to make sure nobody is watching. Once everything is uploaded, I delete the files from my phone's camera roll and recent items, going through every folder twice to make sure Dad won't find anything if he checks. The hidden cloud folder is password protected, and the password is something Dad would never guess. A line from a book Yasmin used to read before she got too sick to care about stories. I get home right before dinner, and Dad is already at the table with his clipboard, that sick smile on his face like he's about to host a game show. Mom is setting out plates with mechanical movements, her face blank and empty. Yasmin sits hunched in her chair, coughing into her elbow, and Yusef is watching everyone with calculating eyes. I slide into my seat and immediately lean toward Yusef, keeping my voice barely above a whisper. I tell him I'll rank him high tonight if he helps keep Yasmin off the bottom, promising him the couch if he ranks Mom second to last. His eyes narrow as he considers the deal, weighing the benefits against the risks. Dad's gaze shifts toward us, and I can see him noticing the whispered conversation, but Yusef gives me a tiny nod of agreement. When the voting starts, I rank Yusef second and myself last, and Yusef follows through on our deal. The final results give Yasmin the couch, Yusef the sleeping bag in the basement, Mom the shed, and me the garage. It feels like a victory for about 30 seconds, until I notice Dad making notes on his clipboard with that cold, calculating expression he gets when he's planning something new. After dinner, Dad stands up and announces a new rule in his calm, reasonable voice. He explains that any collusion or vote trading will result in automatic pit placement for both parties involved, effective immediately. His eyes are locked on me and Yusef as he speaks, and my stomach drops as I realize he saw everything. Our whispered deal, the coordinated votes, all of it. He's always one step ahead, always finding new ways to isolate us from each other and prevent any kind of alliance. My small victory turns to ashes in my mouth as I understand that protecting Yasmin just got infinitely harder.